So, Camille, I'm
Yeah.
going to try and describe what happened in my very simple, small-brained English style so that you can best explain where I've got it wrong and tell me. So, my understanding is that you were working on the Johnny Depp legal team in his fight, as it were, because he was suing Amber Heard, who had been his wife.
That's correct.
That's right. And she was counter-suing him. Ugly, 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 lots and lots of arguments. But it propelled you into an extraordinary position, didn't it? Because suddenly the media were focusing on you rather than these Hollywood stars. And well, that's a strange situation to be in.
Absolutely a strange situation to be in that was overwhelming at times. But I learned a lot of lessons that apply to, I think, people that are attending this conference that think about privacy, security, and what that means both for individuals and corporate clients.
Because there was so much interest in this particular case, and people started searching you up, and Google Trends saw your name rocketing ahead. I read somewhere that a hashtag of your name appeared 900 million times or something on TikTok, of all places. Vogue called you an overnight celebrity. Now, with that much interest in you specifically, did you have to take steps to protect your online privacy? Because suddenly you were being propelled into the limelight, as it were, into the spotlight of people's interest, when you'd never sought a career like that, had you? You're a legal expert, right?
That's right. Again, I'm a legal expert. I became a lawyer because there's a lot of us in the United States, not because I was seeking any type of attention. I represent a lot of high net worth and famous people, but it's not something that I ever sought out. So to answer your question, Graham, absolutely, there was a protocol put in place to protect my data, my privacy, my family's privacy, because there was this surge of interest. And the steps that the firm that I work at took to protect that information, again, translates to how we handle famous people's privacy, information, and companies.
So if we talk first of all about you and your situation, then maybe we can broaden it out to the case as well. In your personal situation, steps were being taken. I mean, is the law firm that you work for, is that a large firm? Is there a big IT team or something of people who are cybersecurity experts?
We actually outsourced it to a security company to be able to protect our phones because we did have some attempted hacks during the trial.
So there were people trying to hack you. Now, I come from the UK where there's a history of journalists and the media hacking into people, sometimes the victims of crime, sometimes people of interest or people of politicians. Do you know who was trying to hack into your organization to try and find out more about you and the case?
I don't personally know, but there are people at the firm that definitely were able to get to the bottom of it. But I remember turning over my devices to be able to have them secured for us in the middle of the trial because there were attempts to access information.
So I'm thinking, just as you were sort of thrust into the spotlight because of media attention, there are organizations here, there are companies here and people who work for companies, people who work in the security departments. If the worst should happen, if some of these companies suffered a hack or a data breach, some kind of cybersecurity incident, there is the potential that other people may try and find out about them. We've seen very contentious hacks happen in the past where there's almost this sort of vigilante element. I mean, there was, for instance, Team Johnny and Team Amber. The world was divided as to who you believed and what side you're on. It was like Jennifer Aniston versus whoever it is, Brad Pitt or something like that. So are there lessons, do you think there are applicable lessons which people could apply to their own cybersecurity from your experiences?
Absolutely. I mean, I regularly advise clients on preparation. And as a lawyer that understands that cybersecurity really does interact with your brand and how you protect your brand. And that's something that's really important. You can find very good lawyers in the world, but people that understand that if you've lost in the court of public opinion, you've lost, that's more rare. And so I think one of the things that we regularly advise clients on is preparation. Mm-hmm. Who's on your crisis team? How do you report a crisis, whether it's a breach, whether it's a cybersecurity attack? How do you disclose both to the government, to your customers, to your employees? How do you understand what's actually happening? Did your employees know that there were weaknesses that needed to be addressed? Did they put that in writing? Have you now exposed your company to a disclosure obligation that you didn't have pre-existing? And how does that all work in the court of public opinion? How do you get consumers and your employees to trust you? What does your brand mean? Is there transparency? These are all steps that I think really work when you have a plan in place to address the crisis before the crisis happens.
Right, because I think all of us, as who work for organizations, we have to accept that cybersecurity incidents occur. If we haven't been hacked yet, we probably will be. It's just a question of how serious the hack will be or how bad the breach might be. But to my mind, quite often it's the case of it's not so much that you've been hacked which is the problem, it's your reaction to the hack. It's how you handle it, your response. I've seen situations, and maybe you have as well, with the companies you've worked with, where the approach the company takes after being hacked can determine whether they're actually coming out smelling of roses rather than something less pleasant.
That's exactly right, Graham. Again, what is your brand?
Yeah.
You have to understand what your brand is and how you communicate that message to the consumer, the employees, the government, the public at large. Everything from social media channels to advertisement to disclosure obligations. Every single thing has to coincide and work together to make sure that the messaging is on brand. And you have to have advisors that understand the difference.
Yeah. So you obviously are coming at this from the law point of view. You're dealing with organizations and individuals who find themselves in these difficult crises. Is it a difficult thing to explain to them how they should be approaching these things? Have they got their ears open to that kind of advice, or is it sometimes a challenge?
It can be a challenge, but I think, again, what distinguishes a good lawyer from an excellent lawyer is somebody I equate it to being a Rosetta Stone. You have to be able to translate legal information to technical requirements. So you need to find legal advisors that understand the technical requirements and can translate what the law requires and how it protects you. So you have to find advisors that can be that translator for you.
Now, I think, from my experience, it's difficult enough getting sometimes the chief executive officers to take security advice seriously. It's almost like they think, well, this doesn't apply to me because I'm the boss. It's just for the rest of the staff who have to take security seriously. I would imagine if you're dealing, and you don't have to name any names, but if you're dealing with celebrities, and your clients have included Johnny Depp and Jennifer Lopez and Leonardo DiCaprio, etc., they're like the CEOs of their brands. And without casting any aspersions against any particular individuals, I would imagine it's quite difficult to tell these people to behave differently and maybe to behave in a more secure way. What's happening around that?
Whether they're celebrities or they're CEOs of companies, you're right. You're dealing with humans and personalities. Yeah. And this is why what I call a deep bench, having a lot of people on your team that can communicate effectively with different personality types. And sometimes the lawyer is the bad guy, and that's all right. That's why I'm paid by my clients to communicate the hard things to the CEO, whether it's an individual or it's the individual of a company. But the lawyer needs to be able to effectively communicate what the risks are if the security protocols and advice is not taken seriously.
Now, we know that you were thrust into the world's, the media attention of the world, and you've demonstrated remarkable composure in the courtroom, when that's one of the things we're always impressed about by lawyers. When I've been in court, it's not as though I've been doing naughty things, everybody, but when I've been in awkward situations, I don't always feel so composed, and it's almost like, oh my goodness, I feel like I've done something wrong here. What are your strategies for maintaining focus, remaining calm, having real clarity in these sort of high-pressure situations? What sort of strategies do you use to ensure that comes across?
Well, I like to be the most prepared person in the room because I know inevitably I'll be challenged. It's just a matter of when. But if you're the most prepared person in the room, you know that you can face that challenge, no matter whether it's coming from your boss, opposing counsel, the judge, or the jury.
Right.
Or a difficult witness. But knowing the information is so key to being able to perform at your highest level. But I think that, again, translates to any position.
So if you were in court, for instance, and you are questioning a random Hollywood actress about something controversial, would you have role-played previously? Would you have had that'd be quite fun, wouldn't it? I'd love to be Amber. Well, no, I wouldn't love to be Amber Heard, but I would love to have a little bit of role play or something like that. Is that the sort of thing which you did? What sort of things were you doing in advance?
Yeah, preparation includes everything from knowing your evidence, knowing your documents, and then studying the witness. And then for that, I watched countless, taking Ms. Heard, for example, I watched countless videos of her giving press statements on the red carpet, deposition testimony, and then I watched her in person when she testified in the UK trial. And so I really got to know the way she spoke. And I got to understand telltale signs of when I figured she was not being truthful. And how do you expose that to a jury? Because at the end of the day, trial lawyers are storytellers. We're really all storytellers, and that's what we do for a living. And it's how you communicate that in an advocacy-forward way to tell your client's story in a way that's credible and compelling.
So this is where I think it's quite interesting, the parallel here, because, of course, you're in that situation where you're trying to tell a story, you're trying to get across a narrative and to convince people. There will be people working for companies whose bosses, or maybe you yourselves as CISOs, etc., will be required to talk to the media about a breach which has happened, which is about bad news. You're trying to get across your story with your spin as well. So there are parallels here, aren't there?
Absolutely. I mean, the amount of interfacing that as lawyers, especially media lawyers, brand reputation management lawyers, the amount of interfacing we do with the media is key to our representation of our clients. Again, whether they're corporate, high net worth, or celebrity clients, doesn't matter. Everyone has a story, everyone has a brand. How you communicate that, to me, one of the most important things when dealing with the media is education. It's less about tricking them, it's not about tricking them to telling your side of the story, but it's about educating them. What does this court decision mean? What did the company mean when they disclosed XYZ to the government? When they said they were the largest, best cybersecurity company, what does that mean in the marketplace? Is it about transparency? Are you trying to engender trust? These are questions that you have to think about, and the words you choose, both in press releases, social media posts, and when there is a crisis, most specifically when there's a crisis. How do you communicate what your brand stands for? And the words really do matter. So working with lawyers, crisis managers, PR professionals is incredibly important to educate the media as to what your brand is, so that every story that comes out at least is fair and it presents your brand's true story.
Now, in this particular case, the one which everyone knows about, the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard case, you're dealing with two actors. Two people who you would imagine are really good at saying things which aren't true and convincing people they're true, because we've all seen them at the cinema pretending to be people they're not.
Johnny Depp says that he lies for a living.
Right.
As an actor.
As an
As an actor.
Right. So, but of course, you want them to come across as authentic. Mm-hmm. You want them almost not to be too slick. It's like, okay, you're really good at this. Can you be a little bit worse? Is that sometimes what you're saying? To be a little bit more natural?
I think it's about being genuine and authentic. And again, that's true whether you're talking about an individual, someone that everyone thinks they know, or a company that everyone thinks they know. It's about being authentic to who you actually are and what are your values and how do you communicate that. So for taking Johnny Depp as an example, it was about exposing vulnerabilities. It was about showing that jury and in the end the world a different side of him. And we made that promise to the jury at the very beginning of the trial. We said, you think you know who Johnny Depp is, but by the end of this trial, you'll actually know who the man is, not the person that you've seen on your TV screens.
Now, you weren't working alone, although there was a lot of attention on you. Success in cases like this requires a team. In the Amber versus Heard case, you had a team of people. I think I read somewhere that you were all under 40 years old.
The majority of us were.
Right, and you're working. You have to try and foster some sort of collaborative team effort, an environment, in order to have success. What sort of, especially in high pressure situations, what insights can you offer us as to how you make that effective?
Well, I think you need to identify key leaders on the team that are going to lead the response. So whether it's litigation, whether it's a crisis. So you identify who the key leaders are on the team, and ultimately, there's an expression in the United States, the buck stops with them, meaning the decisions, good or bad, the consequences of those decisions stop with that person or those key people. And then from there on, I mean, the team is absolutely critical to your success. And it's about, I think, as a leader, making sure that everyone feels that they have real accountability and ownership over every single important piece of the response. So whether it's the first initial disclosure to your customers, how do you communicate that and make sure that every single person on the crisis response team has a role to play, and that they feel that press release, for example, they touched it. They contributed to it. And when you build that confidence in your team, I think you get the best results. So we were really in the trenches. We understood every single piece of evidence. Everyone played a role. I often told the team, though I was the attorney tasked with Ms. Heard's cross-examination, this was our cross-examination. This was Mr. Depp's cross-examination. So everyone felt that they had a key role to play, and so we elicited, I think, the most excellent litigation from our team, whether they were young members of the team or to the most senior members of the team.
So everyone knew what they had to do, what their responsibility, but they also knew what their responsibility wasn't.
Right, and what their responsibility was to the team, what role they played in the team.
Because there I can see some obvious parallels with what we would deal with in terms of a cybersecurity breach. For instance, I know there have been situations where a data breach happens and the company goes into panic mode and they start putting together a plan, maybe they didn't have one already, as to how they were going to communicate it to the outside world. And then you find out someone on the support desk is answering questions which haven't been scripted, but they're sort of riffing off, well, this is what I think's happened, we're dealing with this situation. Something which should really have gone to some central part of the company and said, well, let's get the official line on this, rather than everyone making up their own answers. So everyone needs to know their responsibility and where it ends. But ideally, in a cybersecurity situation, you haven't left it until the day you actually get hacked.
No, of course not. If there's one thing I can impart, and I've worked with multinational companies that have had data breaches, privacy issues come up, have the plan. Have the plan in place well before the crisis happens, and understand who the team is and what the triage response is going to be, and how you communicate to the public, to your employees, to the customers, and to the government. It's understanding what the government can do to you and for you, because they can do both. Yes, they can, and we all know about the audits, investigations, criminal investigations that have taken place, and a lot of companies have been targeted recently in this specific field. But it's understanding that the government can also provide resources to help when you have data breaches and security concerns.
And in a case like, I'm so fascinated by this Amber versus Heard case, but it was something that people got very, very passionate about. People who'd never met either of the individuals involved here in what was obviously an ugly situation and a disagreement between two individuals. Were there also physical security things which were a concern?
They became, unfortunately, a concern for me. I mean, they were obviously a concern for the client. Mr. Depp has security details that have been with him for many, many years, as one would imagine, but it was not something I ever thought I would require, and it was jarring to be doing your job and then to have your security compromised in a way that happened really overnight, and we didn't anticipate it. And if there's, again, something else that I could, to take my own advice, have a plan in place and prepare, because you never know when life could turn upside down.
Did you feel at risk?
Yes, we had some very specific threats made during the trial.
Crumbs. So, and what were there any actions which you took in order to reduce the risk? Did you move or something, or go to a different property?
I did not, but I did have security put on me. Mr. Depp very generously offered some of his security details to assist with my security, even though, I just would have never anticipated that I would require that.
Because we now live in this age where the likes of Reddit and 4chan, there are dark corners of the internet, and there are people with a lot of time on their hands in their back bedrooms, maybe eating too much pizza, who become almost armchair detectives. And they're saying, well, I'm going to dig out the evidence which proves the case one way or another, and may be tempted to dig around to try and find evidence, either for your side or the other side.
That's right.
Was that sort of thing happening, where people...
It happened tremendously. Yeah, it did. It happened a lot, and most of it was very helpful to our side.
Right.
So we had witnesses come forward, we had information provided by the public, most of it not necessarily legally admissible evidence, but some of it was helpful, and specifically the witnesses that came forward obviously were incredibly helpful. So having the case and the trial publicized and broadcast around the world in a lot of ways really was towards Mr. Depp's benefit.
Well, your side won. Well done.
Thank you.
Johnny Depp won.
The right side won.
Is my understanding. Johnny Depp, Jennifer Lopez, Leonardo DiCaprio, Ben Affleck. I guess my final question is, when I have a crisis, can I call you up? Will you get me out of a pickle?
Yes, Graham, it would be my pleasure.
If Mrs. Cluley is angry with me because I haven't put out the rubbish, or I've failed to empty the dishwasher, whatever it is, whatever outrageous thing I've done, can I call you up?
Absolutely, Graham.
Okay, I'm holding you to that. I hope we've recorded that. Thank you very much indeed, Camille Vasquez.
Thank you.
Thank you, Camille.
Thanks,
Real
Graham.
pleasure.